Good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you today to the first co-chair webinar between the Inter-American Development Bank and Sustainable Energy for All. My name is Ariel Yepes. I am the Energy Division Chief at the Inter-American Development Bank. And for translation, if you can select the word icon at the bottom of the screen, you will be able to switch from English or to Spanish. Si quieren escuchar la traducción en español, les agradezco si hacen la selección de el icono que tiene un pequeño mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y ahí pueden hacer el cambio de español a inglés o viceversa. IDB and Sustainable Energy for All have been collaborating together for the past 10 years on topics that are key for the region, such as energy access, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. We signed our first memorandum of understanding in 2019, where Sustainable Energy for All officially joined the IDB Energy Hub as one of its funding partners. And we recently did our first joint publication on the energy access dividend in Haiti and Honduras. Today, we are pleased to start the discussion on the topic of sustainable cooling and what this means for Latin America and the Caribbean. As temperature on our planet rises, demand for cooling also rises. Providing sustainable cooling for all does not necessarily mean an air conditioner in every home. It means access to affordable and sustainable solutions to address the needs of the vulnerable, such as access to food in good condition and safe medicines, and protection from heat in the transition to clean energy. Over 1 billion people face vulnerabilities due to the lack of access to cooling for basic needs. More than 65 million live in Latin America and the Caribbean. Extreme poverty has increased, and it has become evident that a rapid expansion of medical cool facilities is necessary to deliver equitable access to temperature-sensitive COVID-19 vaccines. Sustainable cooling is key for Latin America, with an estimated population of 48 million persons at high risk, including 4 million living in rural areas and 48 in urban areas at most. Today, we will hear from 5 different speakers who will share their experience on this important topic. First of all, we will have Rosa Garcia, Energy Efficiency and Cooling Specialist for Sustainable Energy for All, and Michelle Halak, Senior Energy Specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ariel. It's a pleasure to be here today. And before starting, well, I would like to give an overview on the importance of cooling. Just, can you see my screen? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Now. Well, I'm sorry. So before starting, I'd like to give you an overview of the importance of cooling in the, in a warming world and the challenges, particularly in the current pandemic context. And first of all, to ensure effective interventions, understanding what the cooling needs are, how they arise and evolve in the future is a necessary first step. And there is a wide variety of cooling needs, and we can look at them in 3 key areas. Cooling for human comfort and safety, which is necessary for thermal comfort for learning, working, and mobility. Cooling is linked also to productivity and incomes, and it becomes a matter of safety for those living in extreme temperatures. Cooling is needed for food and nutrition during the storage and transportation for reliable cold chains and support rural incomes. But cooling is also crucial for health services and infrastructure, indispensable in the current context for securing transport and the storage of vaccines and medicines and for safe medical spaces. SEforALL, for the fourth consecutive year, has published the Chilling Prospects report, which collects evidence to identify the population at risk from lack of cooling. This analysis categorizes risks across 4 populations that you can see in the screen, using temperature, electricity access, vaccination rates, food loss, and income as key indicators for risk. I'm sorry, I think you don't see my screen anymore.
We were seeing your screen right now. We don't see it anymore.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, having a bit of technical difficulties. Just a minute, please. Well, okay, so I'm sorry for these technical difficulties. So let's see some of the figures of these categories that I was talking a couple of seconds ago. So for 2021, about 1.09 billion people among the rural and the urban poor are at high risk in high-risk countries, which are the population in red, meaning that they are vulnerable faced to increasing temperatures and will not be able to meet their needs related to human comfort and safety, food and nutrition, and health. Our analysis also estimates 2.34 billion people lack access to clean and efficient cooling, the yellow column, and a decline in a population at low risk compared to 2020. This setback can be attributed to the pandemic, but we'll talk about this in a couple of seconds. Now, let's take a look to Latin America and the Caribbean. Across the 54 high-impact countries identified in the Chilling Prospects report, 6 are in the region. Brazil is among the critical 9 countries due to its geographical exposure to high temperatures, electrification rates, and economic conditions. In the region, there is a total of 48 million people at high risk and 80 more million people at medium risk, as Ariel just mentioned. And for the first time, the Chilling Prospects report uses subnational data and identifies 22 additional non-high impact countries where high and medium risks are likely to exist for smaller pockets of the population. It can be seen from this graph that the largest segment is the lower middle income, which is the blue color, which is population at medium risk and is roughly 77 million people. Let me remind you that this population will soon purchase the lowest upfront cost cooling devices. So before going in further detail, let me tell you something about these groups of population. The rural poor live in extreme poverty. They do not have access to electricity. They are likely to live in very bad built homes. And this is going to affect directly their revenues. The urban poor, they are facing a different challenge. They are also living in extreme poverty, but they live in slums, in urban slums, where they have also, they are suffering from very bad built environments, and also we are going to use health services with very precarious conditions. Let's take, for example, cold chains with vaccines or with medicines that have been refrigerated in very bad poor quality cold chains. So that means that the quality of these medicines or these vaccines will be also jeopardized. 8 of the 22 non-high impact countries are in Latin America. And with this analytics, it is possible to recognize the risks that face some pockets of the population and solutions and future investments. So we, in the Chilling Prospects report, identified 55 high impact countries. And additionally, it identified 22 non-high impact countries because of its average income, relatively, because of the income, electricity rates, and infrastructure. And now, Although Mexico is not considered a high impact country because its average income, relatively mild average temperatures and access to electricity, that it's almost about 100%, it has the largest number of people at high risk based on this subnational data. In Mexico, the analysis uses data by region, by states, and by municipalities, and based on local data of weather, socioeconomic infrastructure conditions. 2 states, Guerrero and Veracruz, were identified as high impact regions. And here you can see the temperatures that can reach over 40 degrees in the right side and the density of the population in the left side. Likewise, this analysis identifies zones with extreme poverty, and this makes these states high impact regions within Mexico. And this analysis shows us the opportunities that can be seized by using geospatial and subnational data related to local temperature, poverty rates, and infrastructure conditions to identify regions within countries that are at high risk due to a lack of cooling. And taking all this into account and considering the 22 non-high impact countries and the 54 high impact countries, the number of people at risk due to a lack of access to cooling in 2021 is estimated globally to be 1.12 billion. But, well, in a more positive note, several countries in the region are already developing strategies or roadmaps that promote sustainable and smart cooling practices across a country. These are the national cooling plans. These are being developed by a number of countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. For example, Cuba, Panama, Trinidad and Tobago have already published them, and many others, such as Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil, are already working on them. And this is a great step, but not all the countries that have population at risk have taken this important step yet. Our call to action is to use the tools and resources of our partners to understand the cooling needs, the associated risks and solutions available through the development of a national cooling action plan. It is important to consider some of the effects of the pandemic that will in all likelihood have a significant impact on future investments and the trends on access to cooling. The impacts of the pandemic and the economic fallout have been widespread, but remain particularly prevalent among the most vulnerable, and this population is more likely to suffer from heat stress and COVID-19. For the first time since 1998, the world undergoes a deterioration in extreme poverty and food security. And there is a big part of this deterioration that can be attributed to the COVID-19. Remote learning remains inaccessible to at least 500 million students. There is a decline in incomes of the informal sector of around 60%. Women have experienced almost twice more job insecurity than men, despite representing 7 in 10 jobs in essential occupations, in addition to an increase in domestic violence due to the stay-at-home measures. So this is very important because this is helping us to understand the decisions of the governments related to new investments. And I want to show us the massive challenges ahead of us, not only in the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, but also the routine immunization vaccines. It is estimated that to reach herd immunization, 60 to 70% of the population would need to be vaccinated. And just to see this in perspective, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance vaccination campaigns have reached 760 million people since 2020. So this puts in perspective the very, very huge challenge that we have now. By October 2020, 19.4 million children in 26 countries have missed out on a measles vaccine. Just 10 countries account for 60% of unprotected children. 5 of them are the critical 9 for access to cooling, and among them there is Brazil. Now, this figure illustrates the typical vaccine cold chain in routine immunization programs and the equipment used all along from the point of manufacture down to the health centers and outreach points where the vaccination is delivered. A reliable cold chain should ensure the appropriate temperature for vaccines, medicines, and other health products like blood. Medical staff and consumers intervene in this process, as well as several technologies and equipment with diverse energy efficiency standards and gases with a varied global warming potential. Currently, 18 vaccines are in use around the world, and a total of 325 are under development. Some of them require sub-zero temperatures and multiple doses. Here you see the first vaccines that were approved, the required temperature for shipment and the duration of storage. What is more, the vaccination efforts should reach all urban and rural regions. To illustrate this challenge again, DHL estimates that the current vaccine cold chain could only reach 2.5 billion people in just 25 developed countries. There is indeed a long path to go, but understanding what the cooling needs are will give us more tools to create innovative solutions to address them. Reliable data is definitely a key factor for long-term strategies for sustainable cooling. And the use of geospatial and subnational data will also help us to identify specific and vulnerable populations within countries where we can prioritize new programs and investments. So I'd like to finish with the hashtag This Is Cool campaign, which is a solution-oriented campaign. It's a very simple, very fun campaign that uses simple graphics and statements to share best practices on sustainable cooling solutions. So I invite you to visit the website to know more about the hashtag This Is Cool campaign, join the movement, share your ideas, and help us make this world and your life cooler. And with this, I'm turning the floor over to Michelle.
Thank you very much, Rosa. I will try to share my screen right now. Here it is. And as part of this effort of understand the importance that cooling is not a luxury, we include a visualization of this the cooling data of SEforALL that's collected by SEforALL in the Energy Hub. And I want to talk a little bit about what's the Energy Hub project and how we include this visualization that's already available to everybody. So the Energy Hub project, Hub de Energia, it's a project that have the objective to put together in one single shop stop all the data that you can collect that's publicly available about Latin American Caribbean on the key energy perspectives. And it includes, besides IDB and SEforALL, more 4 other partners in the region. And the idea here, it's quite simple. We know that in a world of increasing digitalization and data availability, data it's really valuable. And it's really important to be able to access this data. In other words, you cannot really make decisions and use this data. So the Energy Hub come to put this data together. And our objective is go in the same direction of digitalization, doing public policy based on data, streamline process, discover new tendencies, and open new opportunities. And this makes all the sense with talking about cooling. Cooling is not a luxury in a warming world. We know that there is an increased demand for cooling as the world becomes warmer. Access to affordable and sustainable solutions for the most vulnerable is important for access to nutrition food, access to safe medicines, and protection from heat, what just mentioned Rosa a little bit before. And as it was said, with the pandemic, the rapid expansion of medical cold chain for vaccines is much needed. And there is an undeniable link between access to sustainable cooling and access to electricity. With all this, we have this more than billion people facing high risk due to the lack access of cooling, which part of that 65 million living in lack. You have high impact countries like Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Paraguay, and Peru. And you have some low, not high risk countries, but have really subnational areas that need to be considered. And because of that, we start this initiative between IDB and SEforALL, the cool visualizations on the Energy Hub about this topic. And for that, I want to show a little bit for you how work. So basically, you can go inside of the hub. You have this population without access sustainable cooling, and you can choose between urban area or rural area, and you can choose the year, as you can see here. And you have the high impact countries that you can change, and you can choose the year of your analysis, and you can also compare it with other regions in the right side. So you can compare it with countries in Oceania, Asia, and Africa. And besides that, you can look by country, the trends in the last years since 2010. And also you can make this correlation between the cooling and the electricity access, because as you said, there is a really close relation in some case. And that's the visualization, and everybody can have access to that. So you are really welcome to enter in the hub and also to share it, to give visibility to this information and help policymakers to decide based on that. Still a little bit about what we have in the hub. It's interesting to notice that we have a part of the rural population that have high risk, cooling risk, but also it's interesting that it's a little bit different, but of electricity access, that usually it's more concentrated on rural population. But here also, when you talk about cooling urban population, because the heating and the characteristics of the region, it's also a big issue. And here you can see Bolivia with 38.2% with urban population that have high risk of cooling challenge. And this correlation between the access and the risk of unsustainable cooling system, it's quite interesting, because you see that when you talk about rural areas, the relation between this problem is higher, and in urban areas it's lower. And also here it's important that if it's true that there is a correlation between electricity access and access to cooling, because without electricity access you don't have access to cooling, it's not direct that if you have electricity access you have access to cooling. That's something that we need to keep in mind. And it's also really related with the weather, how the weather is changed, even subnationally or nationally. And so to invite you again to visit the Energy Hub, to access this data, to think about this topic. And that's all for the Hub presentation. Thank you very much. And now we will passing for the panel session, where we will be able, just see 1 second to stop the presentation here. And I would like to invite for the panel Maria Neto to co-moderate this panel with me. Maria Neto is principal specialist in capital markets. Please, Maria, you are welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here together with Michelle. We are going to now have a panel. I think the panel is very important because it's going to be where we have a lot of specific examples on how we are addressing the cooling opportunities and the cooling challenge that we have for our specific region. We'll have a panel that will be mixed, I would say, of 2 different parts. We'll have 3 panelists talking a bit about the specific ways to promote cooling. And we are going to have in particular cooling as service. We'll talk about cooling for district projects and also cooling as an urban solution on the green corridors. And then in the second part of the panel, we will have a bit of the perception on how can we basically promote financing or financial solutions, or what roles can public banks be, multilateral development banks like the IDB, and or local banks. And we are going to have a very beautiful example of the Banco de Estado de Chile on how we can also promote the financing instruments for that. I think we have a lot of exciting examples that can show a bit what we are doing together here at IDB. I will pass directly to Michelle after this introduction. Just reminding everybody that the presentation is in English and Spanish. Part of our panel may speak in Spanish, part in English. Don't forget to use your translation, interpretation, word, symbol down here in the presentation so that you can hear in the language you feel more comfortable about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now I would like to invite our speakers to open their camera, and we will start with our panel with Thomas Montmans, that's Sustainable Energy Finance Specialist base. And for Thomas, we want to discuss with you a little bit about the challenge and for efficient cooling service. So, in your opinion, what are the key challenges to improve clean and efficient cooling service in the Caribbean for the key stakeholders involved?
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. We see a number of market barriers that make it difficult to improve the reliability and the efficiency of cooling in the Caribbean. And these can be categorized for the three key stakeholders, which are the users of cooling, the solution providers of cooling, and the investors who invest in these projects. So for users, the more modern or efficient solutions cost more upfront, and users might not have the required capital or the credit capacity. Secondly, users might not trust that the operating savings, so the cost savings, justify this additional investment. Thirdly, users often do not know this new technology and are not familiar with the maintenance requirements, and therefore see it as risky to upgrade to these newer systems. And also, users typically simply prefer to invest in their core business, and normally cooling is not part of the core business. Now, for solution providers, those who have the better technology need to compete with those that have the cheaper technology. So this is a challenge, and this is related to the fact that these providers have limited credibility towards the client who they need to convince with regards to the promised future savings. And for financial institutions, typically these are not technical experts, and they find it therefore quite challenging to evaluate the potential benefits of these projects. They also tend to have limited experience with green business opportunities, and it's also challenging to finance SMEs. So we work in different countries in Latin America and the Caribbean at base, including in some of the high impact countries that you mentioned, Michelle. And they vary very much in terms of development of the cooling market, and whether there are very strong solution providers which are innovative, or whether there's really opportunity for new companies to still emerge and offer these systems. But to give an example, in the Caribbean specifically, we led a project there with the UN Environment 2018 and 19, where we worked in Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Bahamas, Barbados, St. Lucia. And there we found out that the harsh conditions of the Caribbean really mean that proper maintenance is extremely important, because many users tend to have their assets not being functioning at all, or improperly, or at efficiencies that are not as much as we would expect. And also the very hot and humid climate and the high electricity costs mean that the cost to operate such a system is a big portion of the operating costs, which means that many users really suffer the consequences for not actually making the investment in the better systems. So I'll keep it here for now, and then maybe we can jump into some details later.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's really interesting what you said. You have these different stakeholders, and something that we always feel is that if it's true that we can understand cost because we see the cost, the benefit sometimes is a little bit challenging to estimate because of all these conditions that are associated with the weather, with maintenance, and that's quite insightful. When you think about experience, you start to talk a little bit about the experience, but if you think about innovative solutions, what do you think, what is the experience that come in your mind with innovative solutions allowing to overcome these barriers in the users, providers, and potential benefits? How could you tell us some example to overcome these barriers, and especially associated with the financing part? What we can do?
Sure, thank you for that question. There are many business models and financial mechanisms that we have developed that base specifically for cooling, but maybe I'll refer to the experience in the Caribbean and in Latin America. So during that project, which was called the Caribbean Cooling Initiative, we developed a model that actually overcomes many of these, and which is essentially the transition of a transaction model into a subscription model, in which the solution provider owns the equipment and then operates this equipment and sells the cooling service to the customer. So the customers do not need to invest in that asset, they pay per use, and the provider takes care of all the operational hurdles and costs, which also means that given that the operating costs of these cooling systems are 90% of the life cycle cost, that these solution providers will make sure they choose the most efficient systems in the first place and the ones that do not break down, because if there is a downtime, then there is no revenue during that downtime. So this is what we have called cooling as a service, and there are many financial structures that can able to accelerate the adoption of this model. So these can be related to asset-backed financing or project financing, to essentially, and they can be investment funds or banks that can engage in these projects. And also multilateral development banks can support with, or local development banks with risk mitigation mechanisms like payment guarantees, because naturally solution providers who start engaging in these cooling services now face new risks which are related to the payment risk, potential defaults or delays. And so we have developed this solution together with local stakeholders in Jamaica and Dominican Republic during that project. And then later we launched an initiative called the Cooling as a Service Initiative, where we have been working in other countries in Latin America, namely Costa Rica, Argentina, Colombia, and also another island in the Caribbean, Grenada. And these are all, there are many stakeholders looking into this, and a lot of opportunities for also financial institutions to invest in these green projects.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting, the example of transforming building this new business model. Cooling as a service, it's a new way to think about energy and electricity, and it's really aligned with all the process of digitalization and the transformation of the sector itself. So that's quite interesting, and I guess it gives us a lot of food for thought to think about how to make it sustainable and affordable for everybody. And in this context, think about this efficiency. I would like to invite Xuanlong Chen, that's senior advisor in the Copenhagen Center of Energy Efficiency, to talk a little bit about this topic with us. Welcome. Yeah,
Hi,
that's good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So thinking about also, let's say, a little bit out of the box to solve this questions, thinking about new business model. What could you tell us about district cooling? That's really another way to think about that. So what's the challenge? What is district cooling? And what's the challenge? What's the kind of challenge that it can help us to solve? And also, if you can talk a little bit about lack. So what is district cooling? What kind of challenge can it solve? And why should we, from Latin American Caribbean, thinking about this?
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah. So actually, this district cooling actually is not a new technology, but like in other countries, actually it is defined as public service. to all the end users. So when we say public service, it's like heating, like water, like electricity. So it's like defined as a service. So I'm very much agree with Thomas who talk about the cooling as a service. Actually, that is one of the innovative business model that is used in district cooling as well. So actually the purpose of district cooling is has been like the district cooling technology has been proven to be one of the most efficient and cost-effective solution to improve energy efficiency in the level of a region or a cluster of buildings. So actually, when we move the focus from one single building to a cluster of buildings, and then think about rethink about the energy efficiency, we will find that some of the technologies which can use a lot of renewable or free cooling essential, maybe is not technical or economic viable in the building. But when you combine them in a cluster of buildings, it will become cost effective. So according to our studies and project implementation in globally, actually it can help municipality to increase primary energy efficiency, reduce air pollution and other greenhouse gas emission, and also phasing out environmental friendly refrigerants. It is more economic viable in large scale of areas with high building density and cooling demand, like central business district, like university campus, like a remote village where there's a difficulty to access any electricity, and also city complex with misuse of commercial and residential buildings. And then one of the benefits is that it can use the free cooling from ocean, from rivers and the lakes, and then also probably recycle the potential waste heat from industries, for example, power plants, so that it can combine different energy or low quality of energy to produce cooling. And then as introduced by Rosa earlier, Latin American countries have a huge demand for cooling. However, the population with access to cooling is relatively low, and then the cooling efficiency still have some space for improvement. So it is required to find cost-effective cooling solutions with higher energy efficiency. According to our analysis, actually, the Latin American countries will increase 1.5 to 2 times larger for cooling demand in 2050. So it is because the rapid urbanization, increased indoor comfort demand, and also the development of food supply and storage, and also the need for COVID vaccination, as well as the cold chain. So some of the Latin American countries have already take actions, like some of the countries already put district cooling or district energy as one of their updated national determined commitment NDCs, like Colombia and Chile. And however, DC is not the only solution, and then I think that we need to combine different solutions of cooling to provide a sustainable cooling to the country. And then, as we can see from our assessment in some cities in Latin American countries like Colombia, Chile, and Argentina, there are a lot of good matchmakings already. So and then we also can see that the cities are already taking actions, like Colombia and Chile. The municipality has implemented some of the district cooling project in Medellin, Colombia, and also more other cities are following up, moving from only on paper rapid assessment to feasibility study or to implementation already. Through these demonstration projects, sustainable cooling technology, business models, and benefits can be shown. And then after all, seeing is believing. So I think after these demonstration projects, and then we can, district cooling can be widely accepted. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's quite interesting. It's also going the same track to what Thomas just mentioned. As you said, it changed a little bit the idea of electricity service, the cooling as a service. And it's quite interesting to think that different of electricity access that the rural, the low density, it's let's say the main challenge. Here you have urban, so high density, and high density makes sense when you think about district cooling. That's a really quite insightful. But now let's think a little bit one step further. If you think about the finance of district cooling, as you said, we start to have pre-feasibility studies, we have potential to do it, you have demand, but you think about finance. To finance district cooling, what are the key steps? What we need to have in mind to think about that? One thing that we call our attention that maybe can be part of it, it's when you think about this as a service, as a basic, somehow basic service. So if you can talk a little bit about that, to be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Michelle. Yeah, actually, I think that there would be like several steps. And then the first of all, it is very important to do energy mapping and planning before you identify any district cooling projects. Like I mentioned, district cooling may not be the only solution, and that may not be the only, may not be cost effective in certain conditions. So it is very important that in a larger picture that you identify the potential of different cooling technologies. And then, as I mentioned, that the district cooling technology needs to have, like, for example, free cooling, needs to have like high density of cooling demand, and as well as like long-term plan. So it would be good that to do the energy mapping and planning and then integrate it into the master planning when the municipality move on for the long-term planning. And then based on the energy mapping and planning, we can identify some of the districts or regions which is cost effective or economic viable to integrate district cooling, and then based on that we can design the business model. Like Thomas mentioned, cooling as a service would be one, and then also like the other business model like PPP, public-private partnership, or like BOT or other business model can be also possible, and then which can bring in public sector and private sector together, and then to implement the project. And then the last one is I think that the capacity building is really important. And then as we did the REPI assessment in some of the Latin American countries, we found that one of the challenges that the local stakeholders or municipalities don't have the capacity even understand what is district cooling and then how the benefit it is. So it is also very important to have these trainers programs to help them, to build up this capacity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. When you think about capacity mapping, planning, data is key. And also when you think about planning, it comes to my mind all the discussion we're having about long-term strategy for Paris Agreement, and also about how to integrate it inside of the cities. And somehow the city, when you think about district cooling, come in the center. And in this context, I use this to invite our next speaker, Alejandro Restrepo Montoya. I hope I pronunciate your name well, Alejandro. To talk a little bit about the city modeling green corridors. That I guess it's another example in this way. And I would like to ask you, start to think about how green corridors can help us to deal with the cooling challenge. And why is it an innovative solution?
Hi, Michelle. Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. And about the Green Corridors project, is a process of environmental urbanism where the natural components are restored. Those natural elements have been lost over time due to the conventional processes of urban growth, while the natural areas are reduced. It is about planning cities from their natural components to obtain higher and better quality standards. One of them is the systematic and sustainable reduction of temperatures. Another is the improving of air quality. And one more is the recovery of biodiversity in urban environments where most of the world's population lives. It is a strategy to respond to the deterioration of environmental quality and public space in cities with a natural growth process inspired by the geography of each context. The original inspiration for every urban project is the original condition of the city, the regional topography, and the natural components. According to the social and environmental context that we found in Medellin in 2016, and based on the data about air quality, temperatures, and quality of life, the main objective was to improve the living conditions of citizens through two strategies. The first was to improve its environmental quality, and the second was to increase the quantity of public space. For the reduction of temperatures in the city, we start our process from a natural strategy where the natural structures at the peripheries grew towards the interior of the city, configuring its public space, articulating the natural components such as streams, rivers, and mountains, and configuring a continuous network of public spaces from the original conditions of our topography. Thus, conurbation process can be balanced by natural architectural processes where landscape architecture articulates the public space of the city, forms new urban space for the citizens, and improves environmental conditions like decreasing temperature, improving air quality, and increasing the variety of local fauna and flora in urban spaces. We have now the firm conviction that in the coming years, urban planning will be oriented fundamentally to environmental quality criteria to control climate change with local and natural solutions and to improve living conditions based on architectural processes. Cooling is also a must. It's not just a service. And although environmental conditions today are a cause of global concern, it's possible to restore the lost biodiversity through territorial planning processes where public space, sustainability, and natural solutions are the starting point for the conception of cities with higher environmental quality. Therefore, in addition to public transport, education, safety, diversity, and social inclusion, cities must offer environmental quality, health, and well-being. For this reason, cooling must be the sum of global efforts to improve living conditions in our cities and in our planet.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. I could ask you many questions about that, and it's a really interesting and different way to look at that. But for the time being, I need to pass for the next part of this section. Thank you very much. And Marianne, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going now again to ask everybody now to pass to interpretation, porque ahora mis preguntas van a ser en español, visto que los dos personas que van a hablar son de la región y van a estar contando un poco historias de cómo estamos de hecho financiando, ¿no?, iniciativas de cooling en la región. Yo voy a empezar esta parte del panel pidiendo a José Antonio Urteaga, nuestro colega del equipo de energía, que está liderando todo el trabajo del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo en Eficiencia Energética, y pedir a José Antonio que nos cuente un poco, José Antonio, ¿cuál fue tu experiencia? ¿Qué buenas prácticas cree que son importantes desde el BID como un multilateral, un banco multilateral de desarrollo, y qué rol podemos tener para impulsar el financiamiento y las iniciativas de cooling? Un poco las líneas aquí que ya se comentaron en el panel anterior, nuevos modelos de negocio, maneras de apalancar inversión privada y también capacitación institucional. Gracias.
Cómo no, muchas gracias María, y muchas gracias a todos por su presencia. Sí, lo primero que diría es destacar la relevancia de impulsar la eficiencia energética en refrigeración. Algunos datos que son relevantes, por ejemplo, Del total de consumo de energía eléctrica en la industria, un 10% se destina a refrigeración. En el caso del sector residencial es un 38% porque los refrigeradores tienen una alta penetración, 88.5%. En el sector de comercio y servicios es el 23% y en agropecuaria, agroindustria y pesca es el 20%. En total, del consumo de energía eléctrica en América Latina en refrigeración, ocupa el total de este consumo el 22% y el potencial de ahorro es un 40%. En el caso de aire acondicionado, más o menos el total del consumo de la región equivale a un 22%, lo cual significa que ahí también hay importantes ahorros. Hay que señalar aquí, como ya se dijo, que todavía hay un rezago importante en la penetración de equipos de aire acondicionado en la región y que, sin embargo, del total del consumo de la región, el 9% es por aire acondicionado y ahí el potencial de ahorro es alrededor de un 30%. Entonces hay una alta participación del consumo de energía eléctrica por refrigeración y aire acondicionado y hay un importante potencial de ahorro. ¿Cuáles son? Tres ejemplos, voy a decir muy rápido, de las estrategias que podemos seguir los organismos multilaterales. Uno y que es impulsado, diseñado por María Neto y su equipo, es el programa de seguros para ahorro de energía, que permite eliminar las barreras mediante 4 instrumentos fundamentales. Primero, un contrato estándar que asegura la relación entre el proveedor del servicio y el cliente a fin de asegurar la relación durante el proyecto. Un segundo elemento que es una garantía de los ahorros que se ofrecen. En caso de que esta no se obtenga, es cuando actúa esta garantía. Un tercer elemento que es también muy importante es la parte de la validación de estos ahorros por un tercero certificado en este tipo de análisis. Y un cuarto elemento es un esquema de financiamiento que permite que el flujo de ahorro que genera, el flujo de efectivo que genera el ahorro permita pagar los préstamos. Un segundo que también es muy importante y que ya lo mencionó Tomás es el tema del refrigeración como servicio. Me parece que es una iniciativa muy importante que se tiene que también aprovechar de manera mejor y más amplia. Y finalmente, para el reemplazo de equipos electrodomésticos, ha demostrado su efectividad el desarrollo de líneas de descuento de títulos de crédito y con una garantía líquida que permite asegurar el pago de los refrigeradores por parte de las familias que adquieren los créditos. Y aquí es muy importante también la utilización de un medio muy efectivo para la recuperación de crédito como es la factura eléctrica, lo cual permite reducir el riesgo de recuperación, mejorar las condiciones del financiamiento en cuanto a tasas de interés y plazos y manteniendo como precepto, como elemento muy importante, nuevamente el mismo elemento que la mayor parte de las amortizaciones de los créditos se paguen con base en los ahorros de energía. Me parece pues que este tipo de ejemplos junto con la refrigeración distribuida puede ser pues elementos fundamentales que se pueden combinar y aprovechar al máximo los mejores resultados que se han tenido con su implementación y con experiencias y casos prácticos que se pueden dar a conocer y tratando de generalizando, desarrollando modelos que se puedan adaptar a las condiciones de cada país y de cada sector. Gracias, María.
Gracias, José Antonio. Muy interesante el concepto justamente de que el ahorro energético también es un ahorro importante, como decías, con un potencial tremendo en Latinoamérica. Entonces, más allá de los beneficios también de cooling que estuvimos hablando acá, hay un beneficio económico también de ahorro energético que es muy importante. Lo que mencionabas, diferentes modelos también de negocio que pueden tener implicación importante también para estos ahorros a nivel de empresas, a nivel también de familias, como decías también para el modelo electrodoméstico. Si tuvieras que dar un consejo de cómo replicar esto con otras multilaterales, ¿qué buenas lecciones o qué lecciones aprendidas ves que deberíamos estar impulsando como multilaterales?
Sí, cómo no. Yo diría primero es el tema de la información. Ya Michelle presentó el hub de energía. Lo primero que tenemos que saber es efectivamente con el mayor nivel de presión posible cuánto se está consumiendo en refrigeración y cuáles son las oportunidades de ahorro en virtud de la obsolescencia del equipamiento en los distintos sectores que utilizan estas tecnologías. Es un elemento fundamental, de ahí la relevancia de impulsar el tema de información. Un segundo elemento fundamental para poder ahorrar es que los equipos que se comercializan en nuestros países sean de alta eficiencia, y eso solamente se logra a través de la normalización obligatoria y del etiquetado con valores mínimos de eficiencia energética. Y aquí nuevamente tenemos un gran rezago. Más 8 países de la región tienen un sistema de normas obligatorias de eficiencia energética para estos equipos. Entonces, lo primero que se tiene que trabajar es en información, en desarrollar una estrategia de normalización que tiene que ir ligado también a un esquema de un marco legal de eficiencia energética, un marco regulatorio que permita que se estén actualizando todos estos elementos y que también en los planes nacionales, con una ley de eficiencia energética, se impulsen temas como el que estamos hablando ahora. Me parece que también un segundo elemento es impulsar la eficiencia energética mediante la sustitución de equipos de refrigeración como una estrategia para la recuperación sostenible post-COVID-19. Solamente mencionar que de acuerdo con las estimaciones de la Agencia Internacional de Energía, los proyectos de reemplazo de equipos de refrigeración y sobre todo de aire acondicionado en edificaciones, tanto edificios de oficinas como sector residencial, por cada $1.000.000 se generan 15 empleos. Y de esos empleos, en el caso de la sustitución de electrodomésticos en el sector residencial, que se ha llevado a cabo mediante estrategias de canvaseo, es decir, venta casa por casa, en donde pequeños comercios que venden este tipo de equipos van y ofrecen este programa a las casas, son de los sectores que mayor empleo se genera mediante estos programas, al igual que los centros de recuperación de los equipos retirados, su destrucción y la gestión de los residuos, especialmente el refrigerante. Entonces, me parece que hay que verlo también como una de las estrategias clave en la recuperación sostenible por la recuperación del empleo, especialmente también en pymes y obviamente también en las empresas que fabrican este tipo de equipos. Evidentemente, el reto es mayúsculo porque tenemos un doble reto. Primero, lograr un mayor acceso y asequibilidad al servicio que proporcionan los equipos de refrigeración. Y por otro lado, tenemos que asegurar que ese mayor acceso sea eficiente. Y por eso la combinación de estrategias parece la mejor fórmula. No hay un solo camino. Me parece que hay este tipo de grandes ideas como las que comenté antes, que se pueden conjuntar, que se pueden adaptar, insisto, a las condiciones de cada sector y de cada país, y sobre todo en esta coordinación que se está dando entre distintos organismos a nivel internacional y también a nivel nacional. Muchas gracias, María.
Muchas gracias. Algunos puntos muy importantes, ¿no? El punto del etiquetado, de la estandarización. Esto es clave al final. Los señales financieros necesitan también venir con señales más claros también de regulación, ¿no? Y de señales de mercado. También muy buen punto de hacer un punto más claro sobre las oportunidades, no solo en rentabilidad, pero también creación de empleo. Muchas veces no nos damos cuenta cuánto este sector específico resulta también en industria, en empleo, en posibilidades, hasta en la chatarización, como mencionabas, y la necesidad de pensar también en cómo combinamos estos diferentes instrumentos para diferentes países y trabajar un poco más conjuntamente a nivel global para ver eso juntos, ¿no? Porque creo que muchos de esos instrumentos también podemos aprender incluso de otras regiones. Un poco ahora voy a pasar a Carla Romero para que nos hable un poquito. Carla es del Banco de Estado de Chile y en Chile hicieron una innovación muy bonita con el apoyo del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, que fue el desarrollo justamente de estos seguros que mencionaba José Antonio. Y quería un poco, Carla, que nos comentaras la experiencia de cuáles eran los hitos o las dificultades justamente de promover y ayudar a que se destrabara, digamos, inversiones justamente en eficiencia energética, en particular para estos sectores, ¿no? de que pueden incentivar el cooling. ¿Cuál fue la experiencia de ustedes y cómo han podido desarrollar una estrategia para solventar las barreras reales en el mercado?
Bueno, muchas gracias María, muchas gracias al BID por la invitación. Como Banco del Estado de Chile, estamos muy contentos de poder contarles un poco la experiencia chilena en temas. La verdad es que las barreras que tienen los inversionistas me parece que son a lo largo del mundo. Ya lo comentaba Tomás en su presentación, y cada vez que él iba mencionando cada uno de los puntos, yo decía, wow, eso pasa en Chile, ¿ah? Y eso parece ser que está pasando en todos nuestros países. Es importante ver que cuando un inversionista se enfrenta a una decisión, ya sea un inversionista privado, un inversionista público, los estados, nuestros países, por supuesto que hay que tomar decisiones que son con una mirada amplia, ¿no? Buscamos una eficiencia y buscamos un impacto, reducir el impacto ambiental, pero también que esto sea eficiente, que nos ayude en la productividad. Entonces aquí hay decisiones que uno dice, bueno, ¿a qué me dedico? ¿A aumentar mis ingresos? ¿A reducir mis costos? Esta es una básica de cualquier negocio, ¿no es cierto? Cuando hablamos de climatización, esto vuelve a ser un tópico. Cuando hablamos de eficiencia energética, bueno, voy a buscar la eficiencia energética porque busco, por un lado, fundamentalmente mejorar mi productividad, ¿no es cierto?, ser más eficiente, tener menos consumo, y voy a, por supuesto, cuidar también este impacto medioambiental que tengo, porque es una responsabilidad o de mi país, o de mi empresa, o de mi familia, según quien sea el tomador de la decisión. Entonces, las barreras parten por ¿dónde está la decisión? Por ingresos, por costo. Ahí va un primer nivel. La segunda, ¿yo soy experto en esto o yo soy, como dicen en muchos países, zapatero a mis zapatos, ¿no? Yo soy un hotel, me dedico al hotel, me dedico al turismo, me dedico a dar prestaciones de hotelería. ¿Cómo puedo saber de estas cosas? Qué complicado es, qué equipos son los más eficientes, cómo hago este recambio, cada cuánto debería hacerlo. Entonces surgen un montón de cuestiones, de preguntas a este inversionista respecto de conocimientos en tecnología. Dependiendo del tamaño, puede que tenga un equipo interno de técnicos, o puede ser que hablemos de una empresa más bien pequeña que no se justifique que tenga personal técnico que ayude en estos proyectos. Por lo tanto, ahí empieza el tema de la confianza o las características que tenga de pronto el proveedor. Me da confianza, tiene experiencia en mi sector, en estas tecnologías, ¿cómo sé yo que es el mejor? Si te fijas, va siendo un conjunto de variables que afecta a la hora de tomar las decisiones. Y por último, cuando el proveedor, probablemente voy a buscar al mejor proveedor del sector para mi solución, pero me dice, mire, usted va a ahorrar tanto por ciento y en tantos años se paga esta inversión y después es puro ahorro. Y la última pregunta que le surge al inversionista, ¿pero quién me asegura eso? ¿Ya? ¿Y si cambia las condiciones climáticas? Si a lo mejor yo no sé usar esta tecnología y la uso distinto que como debería ser. Entonces, la verdad es que aquí nosotros decimos, ¿cómo ayudamos a solucionar todas estas incertidumbres? Ese fue, María, el asunto que nos llevó a buscar productos innovadores. Y tuvimos la suerte de encontrar con esta solución que ya la había pensado el BID, que la desarrolló este equipo, ¿no es cierto?, con el producto Energy Saving Insurance, el producto de seguro de ahorros energéticos. Porque claro, cuando nosotros le decimos al inversionista, mire, aquí como banco le tenemos una oferta financiera, tenemos créditos con normalmente los bancos tenemos buenas condiciones para propiciar, ¿no es cierto?, la eficiencia energética, las energías renovables o cualquier otra inversión que se haga que afecte positivamente el medio ambiente, que lo cuide, que lo respete o que ayude en el cambio climático. Y eso es así, lo tenemos. De repente, cuando el inversionista dice, me parece fantástico que me des buenas condiciones en el crédito, ya me ayuda, pero no me resuelves las otras preguntas que te acabo de hacer. Entonces ahí es donde entra el seguro de ahorros energéticos, que tal como lo explicó José Antonio, tiene uno de los factores más importantes, lo que yo le llamo una institucionalidad. Está armado con diferentes piezas donde no solamente está el banco que financia y que promueve que todas estas cosas ocurran, sino que además hay un validador técnico, normalmente una empresa de mucho prestigio técnico en el país local, que es el que mira primero en papeles que el proyecto sea bueno, sea adecuado, esté bien dimensionado, de los ahorros que se van a estimar lo más cierto posible, pero que además se asegura de que en la implementación de la tecnología, el equipo que se ofreció en el documento sea exactamente el equipo que se implementa. Con tal ahí, me imagino que las diferentes partes que están aquí, Alejandro, que sabe bastante de implementaciones, ¿no es cierto?, con todos sus proyectos de arquitectura, uno ahí aspira y dice, wow, si hay una entidad, ¿no es cierto?, mejor aún si tiene mucho rodaje en temas de fiscalizaciones, de validaciones, yo me puedo quedar tranquilo. Hay un contrato, por lo tanto, también que dice cuáles son todas las condiciones en que se paga o que entra en responsabilidad de alguna de las partes. Y es todo tan claro y tan transparente que nosotros ahí, como Banco del Estado, quedamos tranquilos en decirle al cliente, te ofrezco un crédito, pero no te dejo solo, te ofrezco un seguro. Con esto, nosotros creemos que el inversionista puede quedarse tranquilo y dedicarse a gestionar su negocio.
Muchas gracias, Carla. Súper importante algunos puntos, ¿no? Primero, cómo demostrar el ahorro energético, lo que mencionaba un poco José Antonio también, la importancia de poder estimar y demostrar el ahorro que estos proyectos pueden tener. También el problema de que aunque queramos impulsar, sobre todo a nivel de otros niveles, como decía José Antonio, familiar o empresas pequeñas, cómo crear conciencia a los inversores de la necesidad de cambiar equipos, aun cuando ellos están funcionando, y que esto puede tener un impacto positivo no solo social y no solo ambiental, pero también económico, ¿no? Y un poco me parece extraordinario el trabajo que ustedes han hecho, justamente desarrollar una estrategia que intenta atraer los proveedores junto con el banco para crear, digamos, seguridad a las empresas de que puedan hacer estas inversiones, como decías, dar tranquilidad al inversor, que él pueda tomar una deuda y que si este recurso va a resultar en ahorros energéticos. ¿Qué sugieres en términos, nosotros estamos aquí desde el BID intentando replicar esto en toda Latinoamérica? ¿Cuáles son las lecciones aprendidas que crees que es importante si tuviéramos que pensar de aquí cómo ampliar a modelos de negocio para otros lugares también? ¿Qué fue que aprendieran ustedes en el diseño que tendríamos que tener en cuenta?
Sí, nosotros como Banco del Estado con esta experiencia creemos que esta es una solución que definitivamente la necesitamos en ojalá todos los países. Las lecciones fundamentales que nosotros aprendimos es que primero partimos nosotros conversando con los proveedores para decirle, mira, aquí con esto tienes una herramienta más para vender un poco más. Porque un proveedor podría decir, ¿y por qué yo tengo que asegurar mi propio proyecto si yo sé que está correcto, que está bien dimensionado, que yo tengo las capacidades para hacerlo, que tengo un prestigio y todo eso? ¿Por qué yo tengo que autoasegurar lo que estoy entregando? Bueno, probablemente porque quieres vender más, ¿no es cierto? Probablemente porque esto es un ganar-ganar para todas las partes y todos queremos que esto avance. En la medida que tengamos más proyectos eficientes, con menos emisiones, creo que estamos hablando en definitiva de una ganancia mundial. Entonces, acá la conversación con el proveedor es, nosotros en la implementación de todo este sistema, que es el ESI, te estamos ayudando a que tú vendas más, que estés más seguro de que más gente va a confiar en ti. Pero por otro lado, quizás esa es una de las lecciones, María, es que no basta con ir a los proveedores que son los expertos y que van ellos buscando a estos inversionistas, sino que hay que ir directamente a los clientes, directamente a los inversionistas y por sectores decirles, mira, si bien un banco uno diría, oye, pero tú no deberías estar diciendo cuánto va a ahorrar cada sector. Bueno, quién sabe, quizás no lo tengo que hacer, pero si yo sé ex ante cuáles son los sectores que son más intensivos en energía eléctrica y qué tipo de tecnologías ellos debieran observar, debieran cambiar, ¿no es cierto? Y más aún, podemos ir un poquito más allá. Ya sabemos ex ante también más o menos cuánto es el porcentaje de ahorro que se puede lograr en los recambios tecnológicos por industria. Por lo tanto, si yo entrego esa información como una alerta y siembro esa larvita en el inversionista, va a decir, wow, voy a averiguar, voy a tomar atención en esto porque de verdad que esto me conviene. Entonces, creo que de alguna forma, María, es importante llegar a todas las partes, llegar a los proveedores que son probablemente una fuerza de venta importante de las tecnologías, pero por otro lado, llegar al cliente, porque de lo contrario puede estar buscando focos de eficiencia que no van por acá y que de repente no se le han pasado por la mente todavía hasta que sea inminente. Que sea inminente por dos vías. Una, por las leyes de eficiencia energética, Chile ya la tiene, ya acaba de lanzarla hace muy poco, y por el otro lado, estas metas que tienen los países de carbono neutralidad, que también Chile se ha planteado. Entonces, en la medida que empujamos, podemos empujar por el lado de la conciencia, podemos empujar por el lado de la eficiencia y podemos empujar por el lado de las leyes, ¿no es cierto? Finalmente vamos a llegar a lo mismo. Sin embargo, si esperamos hasta el lado de las leyes, probablemente nos estamos restando de hacer ciertos ahorros inmediatos, ¿no es cierto? Entonces, yo creo que las enseñanzas que nos dio el implementar el ESI en Chile tiene que ver con que tenemos que conversar todos acerca de esto. Para muchos países esto aparenta no ser nuevo, pero realmente lo es. Entonces, en conjunto creo que podemos mover estas barreras.
Muchas gracias, Carla. Muy importante lo que mencionas, ¿no? La importancia de los proveedores, de trabajar con ellos, de demostrar para ellos que ellos también son importantes desarrolladores de mercado, pero también lo que mencionas, ¿no? Una actitud un poco integral de pensar también cómo ayudar a la propia regulación a que con esquemas muy pragmáticos podemos ir creando incentivos en paralelo. Todas las cosas, como decía José Antonio, son importantes. Y aquí lo que tenemos como hito es poder pensar. Para mí fue muy inspirador escuchar este panel porque hemos visto muchas maneras diferentes de impulsar básicamente cooling con diferentes iniciativas a nivel municipal, a nivel de empresas, a nivel familiar, con medidas que pueden tener de un lado el lado de regulación, estandarización y de otro incentivos para los privados. Yo creo que aquí tenemos una oportunidad muy bonita desde el Banco Interamericano de seguir trabajando en estas cosas, pero también de aprender de estas lecciones para poder, como lo que Carla mencionaba, replicar a otros países y poder tener más de esto en nuestra región. Yo con eso voy a pasar, Michelle, de nuevo a ti para que maybe turning to English again. Continue now with the close to closure of the event. Just to say that I'm really excited to see this conversation with the team of Sustainable Energy for All. And for us, it's really our commitment here to keep supporting this agenda because it's very, very much, as Jose Antonio mentioned, also for our Inter-American Development Bank, part of the recovery of the region agenda. And we see this as a big opportunity aligned to our 2021 vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think I don't have much more to say. Just thank you very much. And I will pass the word to Clotilde to closing and wrap up this discussion. Clotilde, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for having me today and to the Inter-American Development Bank for hosting this workshop on sustainable cooling. I would like to thank the panelists also for sharing their insights and experience and for conveying the message that access to sustainable cooling needs to be a priority for Latin America, as it cannot be considered a luxury. We heard that more than 3 billion people globally are at high or medium risk because they lack access to sustainable cooling. And of these 3 billion, 1.09 billion people are facing high risk as they cannot meet their cooling basic needs. And 65.5 million of these populations at high risk live in Latin America and the Caribbean. So as Rosa mentioned, access to cooling relates closely to access to food and nutrition, to healthcare and vaccines, to gender, to education and productivity, as well as to energy and climate. So each of which means that achieving access to cooling will support achieving many sustainable development goals. So today we heard about how important data is to identify access to cooling gaps, both at national and also at local and regional level. So Energy Hub is a very useful resource and helpful as it gathers energy data for Latin America and makes it easy, accessible, and understandable through the broad use of visualization that we've seen today. So technical solutions such as district heating networks and high efficient air conditioners can help provide sustainable cooling more sustainable. So Zulun Chen shared his experience in developing district cooling projects in Latin America and how district cooling can be very energy efficient, cost effective, and reduce the building environmental impact, of course, when it's applied to cluster of buildings with high density that have high cooling demand. Alejandro shared how passive solutions as greening and shades can help decrease demand for cooling and the heat island effect. And this is particularly relevant in highly urbanized regions, including in Latin America. So making our cities greener and more beautiful and pleasant to live can help decrease in temperature and cooling needs. Then we've heard about the importance of having cooling which is both efficient but affordable. And Thomas mentioned how upfront cost of efficient technologies are very relevant, and financial models such as cooling as a service can help addressing the needs of the poorest population and make more efficient cooling appliances accessible, as they can indeed make the users profit from the lower operation cost that can be achieved from the higher efficiency. Jose Antonio also shared that financing schemes such as cooling as a service can be instrumental in promoting efficient cooling systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. And these schemes can be promoted by MDBs, and in particular the Inter-American Development Bank, together with other financing initiatives that promote energy efficiency in cooling through clear contracts, guarantees of energy savings, and certified consumptions and cash flows. Similarly, experience on the importance to provide guarantees to overcome the uncertainties related to future savings that comes with efficient cooling products have been mentioned by Carla and has been experienced by the Banco de Chile when promoting highly efficient units. A key factor that has helped beyond the availability of financing programs is to have technical validation and a guarantee of the goodness of the solution. And now my call to action, which is for us to further raise awareness about the risks related to access to cooling gaps and to address cooling needs for comfort in food and health. As the world needs access to vaccines to fight the COVID pandemic, access to cooling gaps can underpin an equitable global distribution, as current cold chain infrastructure is inadequate to deliver the necessary quantities of vaccines, and particularly so in developing countries, for remote populations and when vaccines need very low temperature cold chains. This is an important year for energy and climate goals, with the upcoming COP26 under the presidency of the UK and the UN high-level dialogue on energy. So we need to come together as a community and promote sustainable cooling solutions. I would like to thank you for your participation and active contribution, and we look forward to hearing more sustainable cooling solutions in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.